This course has really opened my mind to a lot of new things. I really like being able to discuss all the readings in class. I found it very interesting to hear what my other peers had to say. From Tim Wise's White Like Me, I find it incredibly shocking to find out that some of the anti-discrimination laws are fairly new. In this chapter, Born to Belonging, he says there had been nothing unlawful until 1968 about discriminating, even blatantly, against persons of color looking to purchase or rent a place to live. He was explaining that in the community where he grew up, they didn't have any colored residents and that this was not by accident. He was using this to explain some of the privileges he and his family received just because they are white. I never really thought about how the laws that have been in place in the past to keep minority groups from moving up in society still hinder the same groups today. I guess it was something that I never had to experience myself. In my pre-identity, I said that over half of the employees at my work are minorities. Giving it more thought, I can sort of see white privilege at my work. I work in a foundry, and I see that most of the unskilled laborer jobs are done by minorities, while the nicer office jobs are done by white people. One of my favorite subjects that we discussed in class was the issue of calling the victims that were displaced during Hurricane Katrina refugees. Before reading this article, I didn't think that there was anything wrong with calling the victims refugees. After reading Why Katrina's Victims Aren't Refugees, Musings on a Dirty Word by Adeline Masculier, I got to hear that there are many reasons for why it would bother the victims. One of the lines in Masculier's article that made a big impact on me was that the devastation produced by the hurricane could have brought attention to the social roots of violence and poverty, but that instead the public was presented with labels and images that often criminalize the poverty of the victims. After thinking about all the news reports that I had seen after the disaster, I realized that the media was definitely one-sided in their reportings. We also read the epilogue from Tim Wise's White Like Me. In it, he mainly talks about how Hurricane Katrina affected the poorer African American communities in New Orleans. One part that Wise mentioned that I found to be particularly disturbing was when Wise was talking about how the police came to help out after the hurricane hit. Wise says the news never showed police officers going into crowds at the Superdome or to the hotels downtown and plucking out white folks, especially European tourists, and moving them to the front of the evacuation lines for buses. From reading Wise's chapters, and after discussing it in class, I can see that I have to look beyond just what the news presents. I can see that not all the facts are presented in a neutral light, and many reportings lead to negative stereotyping. Before this class, I didn't think that the news could instill stereotyping on its audience. Even if you don't intend to stereotype, you can learn negative associations just by watching television. Another film that we watched in class also dealt with stereotyping of minorities. We watched a portion of Tim Wise's film on white privilege. In it, he mentions that when a white child doesn't do well in school, it's just said that they aren't working up to their potential. But when a colored person gets bad grades, they get second-guessed if they really belong in that school. Wise said that this is a negative group stereotype. There are many times in my high school where I could definitely see this as negative group stereotyping. Before these articles, I didn't think that there was such a thing as white privilege, but after reading, I can tell that there is truth to it. Society has been treating minority groups a certain way for so long that they don't realize that they're being prejudiced. Also, after watching Spike Lee's Trouble the Water, I got a much better handle on what happened in New Orleans leading up to, during, and after the hurricane hit. From the video, we got to see firsthand how the lower Ninth Ward, which majority of the residents were poor African Americans, were treated as second-class citizens during the disaster. Without this video, we wouldn't have seen how badly the poorer people of New Orleans were treated, not only by the local government, but also by the federal government. In the video, it showed people who couldn't afford to leave New Orleans calling the police for help during the hurricane and were told that there would be no help coming. This clip was just so powerful. It really showed that the agencies in charge during the hurricane didn't do all they could to take care of the poor residents. Another subject that I found particularly interesting was medical migration. We read an article in class that explored the implications of tourist pharmacies within the Mexican border communities that draw a large number of American visitors. In Mexican Medical Border Towns by Alex P. Averill, the prices for pharmaceuticals are 20 to 35% lower in Mexico than in the US. He also says that the average Mexican citizen will spend $38 a week compared to $184 a week for the same medicines in the US. This just got me thinking why a person who could have access to medicines in Mexico would pay almost 4 times more in the US to get the same medicines. I have first-hand knowledge about this because my grandpa is from Mexico. Each year he goes to Mexico for about 4 months. During the year he saves up all his medical needs for when he goes to Mexico. He has needed to have several dental operations done, and he waits until he is back in Mexico to have them because the price is so much cheaper there. We also had a very interesting guest speaker come in and talk to us about this topic. Professor Matt Dahlstrom explained how medical tourism works. Health facilities in Mexico package operations to tourists as getaways. The main idea is that you can go to Mexico, receive your operation, and recover while being able to see new sights and lay on the beach. I had no idea that this was happening in Mexico. Another shocking fact that Professor Dahlstrom shared with us was how the U.S. has the most expensive medical costs in the world, and it isn't even ranked number 1 in the best medical care. This came as a shocker to me because I thought with how high our costs are, we would have the best medical system. Turning to my service learning part of class, I can say that I really loved it. I volunteered with Special Olympics and I had a great time each time I went. From my experiences working with all the athletes, I had a chance to learn so much from them. Before I went, I thought many of the participants were pretty similar, that they all basically had the same problems and acted in the same manner. From working with many different individuals, I got to see that this is not the case. Each person had their own personality and own skills. Most participants were always eager to help all their teammates. I just wish that everyone was like that. I also learned that while some participants are unable to be totally independent, some of them are able to live on their own in their communities by themselves. There were a few participants that came to practice by the city bus and got home the same way. I think this is really great that they are able to have their own independence in Milwaukee. Before volunteering, I didn't know that Milwaukee had a program that was this big for people with disabilities. Special Olympics basically has different sports going on year-round, and I think that's really great for these participants. Because of my service hours, I will be doing more volunteering with Special Olympics even after this semester is over. I got so much out of my service learning experience that I know I want to continue helping out the individuals who are involved in this program.